Your father made mine a promise. I need you to honor it.
I don't know you. Prove it. Prove it. You're chasing my father's money, like everyone else.
You never once asked him anything while he was alive.
Get her out.
The truth doesn't disappear just because you throw it out with the trash. It waits.
The flowers had not even wilted, and already the room was full of people pretending to grieve. Richard Kang had been buried 6 hours earlier, and the private reception on the 42nd floor of Kang Tower was crowded with black suits, quiet violins, and men who smiled with their mouths but calculated with their eyes. Amber Douglas stood at the entrance in a plain black coat, holding a worn leather folder against her chest like it was the only solid thing left in the world. She had told herself she would wait for a better day. But some truths do not wait. Her father had carried this one for 22 years, and he had died still carrying it. She was done letting it die with him. She walked past the waiters, past a security guard who hesitated, and did not stop until she was standing in front of Jun Kang. He was 36, and grief had carved his face into something sharper than sorrow. He was the son now, the only Kang left standing at the head of an empire he had not asked to inherit yet. Mr. Kang, Amber said. My name is Amber Douglas. My father was David Douglas. 22 years ago, your father made him a promise. I need you to honor it. The violins kept playing, but the men closest to Jun went still, the way men go still around a threat they cannot yet name. Jun's eyes moved over her once, cold and quick, the way he had been taught to measure people since he was a boy. I don't know you, he said. I don't know what you think my father owed you. But people have been crawling out of the walls all week with stories about what Richard Kang supposedly promised them. He's not even cold in the ground, and already someone sends a woman to lie to my face. I'm not lying. Then prove it. His voice dropped, quiet and final, the kind of quiet that was more dangerous than shouting. Because right now, all I see is a stranger using my father's grave to get close to his money. Amber felt the folder shake slightly in her hands. Ask him yourself what he owed my father. Oh wait, you can't. Because you never asked him anything while he was alive, did you? Something flickered behind Jun's eyes, not anger. Something closer to a wound. But it closed as fast as it opened. Get her out, he said, and turned away before she could answer. 2 men in dark suits took her by the arms. She did not fight them. She simply looked at Jun's back as they walked her toward the elevators. And she said the only thing she had left. The truth doesn't disappear just because you throw it out with the trash, Mr. Kang. It waits. My father waited 22 years. I can wait a little longer. The elevator doors closed on her reflection, chin up, eyes wet but unbroken, and somewhere behind those doors, a room full of powerful people had already decided she was a liar. If stories like this hit you right in the chest, hit subscribe now. This one is going to wreck you in the best way. Comment where you're watching from tonight. What none of them knew, not Jun, not the men who escorted her out, not the guests whispering about the delusional woman, was that Amber had grown up watching her father sit alone at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at a business card with a number he never called. David Douglas had been a decorated NYPD detective once. 22 years ago, one decision quietly ended the career he loved. A decision connected to Richard Kang, though David never explained what happened, not even to his own wife. All Amber had was a torn page from her father's private journal, found in a shoebox after he passed away 8 months ago. One line, underlined twice in his shaking handwriting. If anything ever happens to my girls, go to Richard Kang. Tell him David sent you. Ask him about the photograph. He knows what he owes us. She did not know what her father had done. She only knew he had died believing that debt was real. And now the man who owed it had just called her a liar in front of a room full of strangers. 3 days later, someone broke into the small private archive where Amber worked restoring historical documents. Careful work that suited a woman who had learned young how easily truth could be buried under dust. Nothing valuable was taken. Only one drawer had been forced open, the drawer holding her father's old case files, which she had quietly been piecing together for months. The police called it a random break-in. Amber did not believe in random anymore. Someone had known exactly what she was looking for, and exactly where she kept it. That night, her phone rang from a blocked number. A man's voice, calm and pleasant, almost gentle. "Miss Douglas, you made quite a scene at the Kong reception. I'd hate for this to become a bigger story than it needs to be. Some doors are better left closed. For your own safety, I'd close this one." The line went dead before she could ask his name. Her hands did not shake. Her mind went clear instead. Someone with real power was afraid of what she might find, which meant her father had been telling the truth. She went back to Kong Tower the next morning, this time waiting by the private entrance until Jun stepped out, flanked by two men, his face unreadable behind sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "Someone called me last night," Amber said, blocking his path. "Warned me to stop asking about your father. Was that you, Mr. Kang? Or is there something happening inside your own family that you don't know about?" Jun's jaw tightened. "You need to stop showing up wherever I am. I need you to stop pretending you don't feel it," she snapped back, and for the first time her voice cracked. "You lost your father 8 days ago. I lost mine 8 months ago. He died with your father's name on his lips and a promise he never got to collect. I am not here for money, Mr. Kang. I am here because a good man carried something heavy for 22 years, and nobody has said his name since he died except me." Jun went silent. For a moment the mask slipped and Amber saw a man who had buried his father without ever really knowing him. Standing in the wreckage of an empire everyone assumed he wanted. "My father," Jun said slowly, "never mentioned a David Douglas. Not once. In 36 years. Maybe," Amber said quietly, "that's exactly why it was real." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing on the sidewalk with a question he could not shake. If that ache just hit you, someone telling the truth and nobody believing her, smash that like button and subscribe because it only gets bigger from here. That question followed Jun home. Unable to sleep, he did something he had avoided since the funeral. He opened the door to his father's private study, a room he had not entered since he was a teenager. Everything was exactly as Richard had left it. The old desk, the locked filing cabinets, a framed photo of a much younger Richard alone on the steps of a courthouse Jun didn't recognize. Jun sat down and for the first time in his life forced open the bottom drawer. The one his father always kept locked, the one Jun had never been given a key to. Inside was a single case file, decades old, its edges soft with age. The name on the tab stopped his breath. Douglas D. Confidential. His hands were unsteady as he opened it. Newspaper clippings, court documents, and a handwritten letter in his father's careful script that began, "If you are reading this, the debt has come due, and I am no longer here to pay it myself." Jun read for a long time in the dark, and when he finished, the room felt smaller than it had an hour before. Everything he thought he understood about his father, and about the woman he had thrown out of a funeral, had just changed. The letter explained enough to be dangerous but not enough to be whole. A case, a frame-up, a murder charge that had nearly destroyed Richard Kang before Jun was born, and a detective who risked his badge to prove Richard's innocence, then buried what he found instead of making headlines. But the letter did not name who had orchestrated the frame-up in the first place. Only that Richard had always suspected it was someone close, someone trusted. The next morning, Jun called the one person who had stood at his father's side longer than anyone, Grace Whitfield, the family's attorney for over 25 years, sharp-eyed and unshakably composed. When Jun said the name David Douglas, Grace went very quiet. "I wondered when this would surface," she finally said. "Your father told me once there was a file he'd take to his grave over. I didn't know it already had a daughter attached to it." "Who tried to destroy him, Grace? 22 years ago. Who set my father up?" "I don't know the whole of it," Grace said. "Only that your father once mentioned a photograph, proof of something he swore he'd never explain while he was alive. I never saw it. I'm not sure he kept it in this office at all." Grace hesitated, glancing toward the door, lowering her voice even though they were alone. "But I do know this. Someone has been standing beside you every day since the funeral, telling you exactly who to trust." That evening, Jun found Amber outside her apartment building, sitting on the front steps in the cold, the old shoebox from her father's belongings open beside her. He sat down without asking. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I read the file," he said finally. "I owe you an apology I don't know how to give big enough." Amber didn't look at him. My father used to say the same case number in his sleep. I didn't understand until I was 26 why he flinched at every badge on the news. He gave up everything to protect a man he barely knew, and that man's own son called me a liar at his funeral. I know. Do you? Her eyes finally met his, glassy but steady. I have spent 8 months trying to prove my father wasn't crazy, that he didn't waste his whole career chasing a promise that meant nothing to the people who made it. It meant everything to my father, Jun said quietly. I think it's the only thing that ever truly haunted him. And I think whoever set him up 22 years ago is the same person who's been standing at my shoulder since the funeral, telling me exactly what to think of you. Amber went still. Someone called me. The night after the break-in. Told me to stop asking questions. Jun's expression hardened into something Amber hadn't seen from him yet. Not cruelty but resolve. Then we're closer than they wanted us to be. They were closer than Marcus Reyes wanted them to be. Marcus had been Richard Kang's second-in-command for 20 years, positioning himself as Jun's mentor the moment Richard's casket was lowered into the ground. His entire future rested on one fact. David Douglas was dead, Richard Kang was dead, and the only proof left was a locked drawer nobody was supposed to open. Now the drawer was open, and the woman he had warned to back off was sitting beside Jun Kang instead of running scared. That night, while Amber worked late reviewing her father's notes at the archive, the door alarm failed. Security footage would later show a man in a dark coat entering through the loading bay, moving straight toward the records room and the drawer that held the last of David Douglas's private files. Amber heard the footsteps before she saw him, and had just enough time to lock herself in the archive vault and call Jun before the man tested the handle twice, then vanished into the stairwell as sirens approached. She was safe. But the message was unmistakable. Someone was willing to burn 22 years of silence to keep it buried a little longer. If your heart is racing, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe now, because the next part is the twist this story has been building toward. Comment your city below. The next morning, Jun and Amber sat together in Richard's study, going through the confidential file page by page, searching for anything Grace's warning had not already told them. Near the bottom of the folder, wedged into the spine for over 2 decades, an old photograph slipped loose and fell onto the desk between them. It showed 2 men outside a courthouse, decades younger, Richard Kang, and beside him, a black man in a detective's coat, both exhausted, both alive with something that looked almost like relief. On the back, in Richard's handwriting, "The day David saved my life. Whatever happens to me, his family is family. RK protect them always." Beneath that line was something Grace's warning had not prepared them for. A second note, added later in a different hand, Richard's but shakier, written near the end of his life. "Marcus was the one who set me up. He needed me gone to take control. David proved it and chose to bury it instead of destroying a man's career over ambition. I have protected that mercy my whole life. Protect it now, son. And protect her." Jun read it twice. Then a third time. Amber watched the color drain from his face as 22 years of silence finally made sense. Not just what her father had done, but who he had done it against, and who had spent 2 decades pretending to be family while waiting for his chance to finish what he started. If that twist just hit you like it hit me, subscribe right now. You don't want to miss how this ends. Comment if you saw it coming. Jun called an emergency meeting of the family's inner circle that same afternoon, in the same reception hall where Amber had been thrown out 8 days earlier. This time she stood beside him, not against him. Marcus arrived smiling, confident, already rehearsing condolences for a father he had helped destroy twice, once with a frame-up, almost again with silence. Jun placed the photograph and both letters on the table without a word. Marcus's smile did not move, but his eyes did. "Jun, whatever this woman has told you." "She told me the truth," Jun said. "My father wrote the rest of it himself. In his own hand. 22 years, Marcus. You let me grieve a man you tried to destroy, and you tried to bury the one family who protected him." The room that had been silent for Amber 8 days ago was silent again. But this time, every eye was on Marcus. "You have 1 hour to leave this building," Jun said. "The authorities will have considerably longer to find you." Marcus's composure finally cracked, but there was nowhere left for it to go. Security stepped forward. For the first time since the funeral, the room did not feel like it belonged to fear anymore. 3 weeks later, Amber stood in the same private study where the photograph had fallen from the file, except now sunlight came through the windows instead of shadows. Jun had spent every one of those 3 weeks proving something to her. Not with money, though he'd offered to restore her father's reputation publicly, which she accepted because it was true, not because it was owed. He proved it by showing up, by listening, by finally becoming the man his father had quietly hoped he'd be. "I don't need you to save me," Amber told him, standing in the doorway with the old photograph now framed on the wall where Richard's family portrait used to hang. "My father already did the saving 22 years ago. I just needed someone to finally believe it happened." "I do believe it," Jun said. "And I don't want to just honor my father's debt, Amber. I want to build something neither of our fathers got the chance to have. Openly. Without hiding in a locked drawer." For the first time since she had walked into that reception hall in a borrowed black coat, Amber let herself smile without bracing for the door to close on her. Some debts are not paid in money. They are paid in the courage to finally believe someone when the truth is inconvenient. Amber Douglas never needed saving. She needed someone willing to open a locked drawer and face what was inside. And in the end, that changed everything. If this story moved you tonight, you are exactly who we make these stories for. Hit subscribe to Empire City Romance Stories so you never miss the next one. Like this video if Amber earned every bit of her ending. Comment where you're watching from one more time. And turn on notifications so you're here the moment our next story goes live. We'll see you in the next one.